Is a pretty timely article to check out with y'all since 4th of July is this Sunday here in the Imperial Core in the U.S. in this settler colonial state. This is from Margaret Kimberly at the Black Agenda Report. Highly recommend her work and that of the Black Agenda Report in general. I'll link this article down below. Title is Freedom Rider. It's kind of her series that these articles go under, The Terrible Origins of July 4th. White settlers were in a constant state of fear of slave revolts. Here, this little passage from the Declaration of Independence itself. Again, this founding document of this white supremacist settler colonial state that became the U.S., which is obviously still, unfortunately, living up to that horrible legacy of racism and white supremacy and capitalism as well. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions, which obviously that whole part is pure projection, because that is what these founders, these colonists did to the native peoples that were here, committed genocide against them, and then obviously, the enslavement of African people as well. So pure projection, and what disgusting projection it is. The July 4th holiday in the U.S. commemorates the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Anyone educated in this country has been propagandized with lies about patriotic colonists seeking freedom from a tyrannical British monarch, when basically, a big part of it, I don't know if she's going to get into it, but Britain was going to, or is in the process of abolishing slavery. Colonists didn't want that to happen for financial reasons, because enslaving people was bringing a lot of money to the colonists, to the colonies. Our minds are filled with tales of Paul Revere and Betsy Ross, which erased the role that indigenous and black people played as they attempted to end true tyranny over their lives. Present-day traditions of enjoying cookouts, vacations, and fireworks should not obscure the true meaning of this date. In fact, analyzing this history is an absolute necessity. Completely agree. The men who every school child is taught to think of as patriots had two concerns which pushed them to declare independence. First, in 1763, the British emerged victorious after the end of a conflict against France. It was known in Europe as the 7 Years' War and America as the French and Indian War. The American moniker existed precisely because the French allied themselves with indigenous nations against the British. British victory brought them French-held territories west of the Appalachians, in the region now comprising Midwestern states, but they knew they could not easily end indigenous wars if settlers along the eastern seaboard were allowed to go further west. Because of continued resistance from leaders such as Pontiac of the Ottawa Nation, King George III issued the Proclamation of 1763, which forbade settlements west of the Appalachian Mountains. One of the speculators, check this out, kind of important, one of the speculators poised to become a wealthier man if settlements were permitted to move westward was George Washington, again, the first president of this settler colonial white supremacist state known as the U.S. He was not alone in his wish to conquer the entire continent and to get rich doing it. Property claims had already been made in these regions, and neither he nor the rest of his cohort were going to let British treaties with indigenous people stand in their way. They largely ignored the edict and went wherever they wanted to go. Their second concern was whether the British were committed to continuing the previously unfettered right to slaveholding. So, yep, she got to it. That's the point I brought up earlier. 1769, an enslaved man named James Somerset was purchased in Virginia and brought to England. He eventually escaped but was recaptured and was in the process of being sold to Jamaica. But Somerset had friends who went to court on his behalf. In 1772, a judge ruled that enslaved people could not be forcibly removed from England. Again, that's only 4 years before this whole Declaration of Independence and all that bullshit started. The ruling didn't end slavery in Britain territories, and in fact lasted in those regions for 50 more years, but even this narrow decision was too much for white Americans who feared that the Crown might undermine or even end their right to slaveholding. The ongoing effort to subdue native peoples created more conflict with colonial settlers. Virginia's Royal Governor Lord Dunmore joined colonists in encroaching on western native lands, and he incited the short-lived Dunmore's War of 1774. But the marriage of convenience was short-lived, as the Crown sought to keep the settlers under control by seizing their stores of gunpowder. The Battle of Lexington and Concord was just one result of this conflict over armaments. In Virginia ended with Dunmore taking refuge on a ship offshore in 1775. From that hiding place, he hoped to manage people who were determined to do what they wanted to do. He declared martial law, threatened to burn Williamsburg to the ground, and declared that enslaved people would win freedom by serving in the king's army. I mean, that would be pretty enticing, obviously, if you're a person under enslavement, fight in this army, gain your freedom. If I was in that position, I would probably, jump at that chance, I would think. But obviously, I mean, that's just, hard to think about how you'd be in that position, especially as a, some 800 of them did just that and formed what became known as the Ethiopian Regiment. White settlers were in a constant state of fear of slave revolts, and Dunmore's actions meant to keep them in check, only heightened their determination to run the country without British interference. While slaveholding appeared to be under threat, British efforts to create loyalty among the people of Quebec again threatened the colonists' plan to take the entire continent. The Quebec Act of 1774 provided religious freedom to Catholics and declared that their land claims extended to the regions of the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley that American colonists wanted for themselves. The Crown and the colonists were both determined to seize lands from native peoples and to continue enslavement, but their interests were also hostile to one another, and war was the inevitable result. White settlers wanted full independence from themselves and no control over their actions at all. The indigenous Pops were nearly eradicated in the decades-long quest for conquest. Expanding slavery was an integral part of those efforts against native peoples. Genocide could not be carried out completely, nor could any accommodation be made with European nations in the quest to control land from sea to shining sea. That is why the settlers declared their independence. The process of decolonizing ourselves is a difficult one, yes. Because we've been brainwashed with this, all this bullshit narratives from a young age, whether it be through media, public school, the government, family, friends. It all plays a part in really clouding our thinking and judgment about the foundings of this country, its genocidal, white supremacist history, past, present, and future, it looks like, unfortunately. We have been cut off from our history, and we don't know where or how our people played a part. As we try to educate ourselves, we find it difficult to give up traditions that we may have claimed as our own. Regardless of personal choices made on July 4th, the causes of the Declaration of Independence must be known and acknowledged. This is the beginning of true independence for Black people. And I would say just people in general, as a white person, I think it's also, really important to understand the racist and white supremacist origins of this settler colonial state that is the United States, because again, these facts are obscured from white people as well, because this system of white supremacy advantages people like me, especially white men in particular, and we're taught to not think about or not question these types of things, and just taught to really embrace these ridiculous and completely bullshit origin stories, like about the 4th of July. So pretty interesting. Again, this was Margaret Kimberly, the Black Agenda Report. Highly recommend their work as the byline says news, commentary, and analysis from the Black Left. And it's great work. Support it if you can. Like the video if you like the damn video. Subscribe for more content. Peace. Much love. All proud of people.